Hello, I think we're live. I hope we're live. Hello and welcome to this evening's event brought to you from Waterstones via my dining room. And I'm Lesely Kara. Oh, I can see people are joining, that's good. Hope you can all hear me. This is the first time I've done something like this, so bear with me. So yes, I'm Lesely Kara. I'm the author of two psychological suspense novels, The Rumour, which came out last year, and Who Did You Tell, which is out in paperback now. And I'm going to be in conversation this evening with Francine Toon, who is the author of Pine. And Pine is the Waterstones Thriller of the Month. So I'm really excited that I'm going to be speaking to Francine tonight. And until she actually joins me, I'm going to be a little bit nervous because I've never actually done this before. So I've got to look out for her. Oh, I think she might have. Is this her here? Oh, here she is. I did her. So I'm hoping that any minute now, any second now, Francine might join us.
Hi.
Oh, there she is! Hooray! Hello, Francine. Do you know, I'm so relieved to see you.
It's great to see you. I'm really glad this actually worked. Yeah, it's the first time I've done anything like this.
Yes, it's quite nerve-wracking, isn't it, when it's the first time?
Yeah.
I mean, I do a podcast, so I'm kind of used to speaking, doing things like this, but when it's live, that's a different matter because we usually pre-record our podcasts. But anyway, welcome. I'm glad you've joined us. I'm going to introduce you properly and then hopefully we'll have a little chat. Okay.
Cut out for a second there, but
yes,
I'm back.
You froze for a moment, but you're back with us now. There's lots of hearts coming up. So I think I've got to disable comments. I'm very sorry, everybody, but I've been instructed to turn the commenting off until nearer the end because apparently some people, we get some trolls. I don't know, that's a bit mean, isn't it? But apparently that happens. So I will turn off the commenting now, but I'll turn it on again nearer the end so that anyone who wants to ask us a question can. Okay, right, so Francine Toon's debut novel, Pine, is the Waterstones Thriller of the Month. And it's also the winner of the 2020 McIlvanney Prize, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, at Bloody Scotland. And I'm not swearing, everybody, for those of you who don't know, Bloody Scotland is a festival, crime festival. And so you recently won that. And in addition, I think you're in the Sunday Times top 10 this week, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, to my great surprise. Yeah.
Number 6.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's totally unexpected. Yeah.
Well, October is really your month, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm just reading here. Pine has been described in The Guardian as a literary gothic thriller to chill the marrow. And having just read it, I can certainly vouch for that. It's really brilliant. And as well as being a debut novelist, Francine is also a poet, writing as Francine. Is it Eleanor or Elena?
Either one really. It's my middle name. But yeah, Francine Elena.
Oh, okay. Francine Elena, and her poetry has appeared in the Sunday Times, in the Best British Poetry Anthologies of 2013 and 2015, and in Poetry London. And Francine lives in London and works in publishing. So there you go, there's your formal introduction. And I think now maybe you could tell us a little bit about Pine, just to start us off.
Yeah, well, Pine is my novel that's set at Halloween, so this kind of feels like a good time to be having this conversation. And it is set in the far north of Scotland, sort of based on an area that I used to live in a long time ago when I was the same age as the main character, Lauren. So she and her father are kind of driving back from their sort of trick-or-treating, it's called guising in Scotland, when they sort of stumble across this strange woman that they take into their car and take home. And the next morning, the little girl Lauren sort of discovers that the woman isn't there anymore. She doesn't really know what happened, and her dad can't remember anything, or he seemingly can't remember anything about what this woman at all. And that kind of sets off a kind of mystery about this kind of small community and the secrets that are kind of lying underneath the day-to-day life that's sort of unravelled the course of the novel. So yeah, that's a bit about it.
And what was it that inspired you to write this novel, Francine? Was it the fact that you'd lived in Scotland? Was it the memories of the landscape? What was it that gave you the journey?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I sort of wanted to think carefully about sort of like the type of novel that I would like to read. And I kind of wanted to draw on something of my own experience. So I thought about sort of the most interesting place that I had ever really lived, and that was in the Highlands of Scotland. And I used to live by this really big overgrown forest that just never kind of left my imagination. It was, it was a really kind of happy time in a lot of ways for my childhood, but there was also a lot of kind of folklore and like storytelling and ghost stories and things like that going on. So it just seemed like a really kind of rich setting that I could kind of draw on to write the novel. So yeah, that's why I chose that.
Yeah, it's the perfect setting, isn't it, for a gothic thriller? And of course now October is the perfect time to be reading it. So
Yes.
With Halloween coming up, I mean, do you have strong memories? The book opens, doesn't it, with guising, which is the Scottish version of trick or treating, I suppose. And I mean, do you have strong memories of participating in Halloween as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, when I moved to the Highlands, I was about 9. And guising, I mean, it's all over Scotland, but it's a version of trick-or-treating, but I think it's slightly nicer than trick-or-treating because as a child, you have to do something to kind of earn your sweets. So you have to like sing a song or tell a joke or some kind of like party piece like that. So it's not really like scaring your neighbours too much. It's like sort of, I think children look quite cute kind of going around these houses telling jokes and stuff like that. And then I lived in a really small village which had about 30 people in it. So we would go around and sort of with our parents and visit neighbours, and some of them would kind of set out like Halloween games for us to play and stuff like that, kind of like duking for apples or sort of things like having donuts on strings and things like that. So it felt like a really fun time, and I've always sort of loved like just anything kind of spooky stories or I don't know, folklore. I remember there was like a library bus that came to where we lived in the Highlands, and I took out like a children's version of Dracula. So I've kind of always been drawn to that side of things, and then I think Halloween for me was just like the best time of year for it. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that about the opening, and I hear what you're saying about it. So guising is a nicer version of trick-or-treating because, Lauren, the little girl, she's dressed as a vampire, isn't she, at the beginning? And there, she's actually going into people's houses because obviously it's a very small, isolated community, isn't it? And everybody knows the children. So it felt a very safe thing for the children to be doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I suppose it's quite a big convention in Scotland anyway. I don't know what it's like in England. And when I was 11, I moved to Fife, which was, it was kind of a bigger community, but it was still, and I was a bit too old to be guising, so I'm not 100% sure what it was like there. But I think it's like quite sort of such a kind of big thing in Scotland that people tend to be quite welcoming anyway. Yes. But maybe not quite in the same way as being in like a really small village where everyone sort of knows each other anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it's become a lot more popular, hasn't it, and commercialised Halloween in the last few years. I mean, when I was growing up in the 70s, it wasn't really a big thing. I do remember being fascinated by it though, and sort of my friend and I making ourselves walk round a graveyard on Halloween night and terrifying ourselves. But these days, it's more about me collecting sweets in to give to people who come to the door. But this year I made a big mistake because I got so many sweets in because the previous year we had loads of kids coming to the door. Groups of children, one after the other. So I got loads of sweets in, and last year, we haven't got there yet. Last October, hardly any children came. So I was left with this big tin of sweets. And, you know,
Oh
what I
dear,
should have done, what I should have done is put them aside for this year or distribute them to neighbours' children. But what did I do, Francine? Can you guess?
Yeah.
I ate the lot.
Yeah. I always get tons of sweets in, actually, even whether or not there are going to be children visiting. I just sort of, just on the off chance some children come visit, I've got like loads of sweets, and usually put up like Halloween decorations and things like that. But I'm wondering what's going to happen this year with all the kind of restrictions and everything, if it's going to be sort of difficult for
good point.
children to go around.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you're not going to want to, well, I suppose if they stand at the end of the driveway or something. But did you have to do a lot of research into sort of the mythology surrounding Halloween?
I think sort of there are a lot of kind of stories in the book that are based on kind of real sort of stories that were told to me when I was growing up about figures like Selkies, which are kind of like mer people. Sorry about the sirens. Now living in London, it's like it's very, very different to living in Highlands. So Selkies, which are sort of like seal people, and Kelpies, which are sort of could be like horses that sort of trick children in folklore. So there are stories like that which I didn't sort of have to research because they were definitely part of kind of growing up. But there were sort of things around like tarot, which is in the book, which I just found really fascinating, and I hadn't sort of known that much about it before I started researching the book. And so I looked into that. There's actually a scene in the book where there's a tarot reading scene, and I don't know why I just decided to actually do like a live tarot reading as I was writing the book for each of the characters, and then kind of just pick a card at random, or whatever card came up, I would sort of imagine how those characters would be reacting to the cards, and then I would sort of write that into the book. So that was quite a fun thing to do. And I just like the sort of symbolism of the tarot and what could be done with the sort of imagery of it, and how that could like feed it to the storytelling kind of aspect of it. And then I looked up sort of witchcraft in Scotland and kind of what women had been accused of doing in Scotland when they were in these kind of Scottish witch trials. And sort of rituals that they had. There's a bit where Lauren puts different jars of things around the house, and that was something that I'd read in an account of a Scottish witch trial about a woman kind of doing. So all of those things were really kind of fun to research, and again, like some of it was sort of based in my own memory, because the sort of town near the village that I grew up, Dornoch, that is the last place in the UK to have executed somebody for witchcraft. I think it was about 1722 or 1723, I'm not sure. So that sort of backstory that we had growing up of this witch trial definitely kind of like was looming large in my imagination, I think, when I was writing the book. And yeah, so I wanted to not necessarily bring that story in, but bring those sort of traditions in and those kind of elements of the story. And the woman who was executed is called Janet Horn, and so I named the town Strathhorn in the book after her. So yeah, there was a kind of a mixture of research and then my own kind of memories of things that happened or stories that were told sort of when I was growing up as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, I'm quite interested in the whole subject of witchcraft as well. So I found that element of the book very, very interesting. And I've been reading, I don't know if you've read it, well, you might not have done, because it's a book called Essex Girls by Sarah Perry.
Right.
Because Essex has a strong tradition and a history about witchcraft as well, because the Witchfinder General, was it Malcolm? I can't remember what his name was now. The Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, that's right, because he was born in Suffolk, but he lived in Manningtree in Essex. And,
right, yeah, I have heard about that. Yeah, that's a really fascinating chapter of history. And yeah, I just know from kind of Scottish history, there's a really great podcast series actually about witch trials in Scotland, because there's a really sort of dark and like quite horrible element to it, of just, you know, these poor people being accused, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. But then there's a lot of kind of folklore and storytelling around it, which is also really interesting. So yeah, I'm just always keen to read about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I mentioned at the beginning that you're also a poet, aren't you? And I was really struck by that, the way your prose is so full of the most amazing imagery and sensory information. You know, your word choice and your sentence structure. I could see this poetry coming through. I was really, you know, I could really feel that sort of sense of the cold seeping into my bones. And poor Lauren, she's always cold, isn't she? Cold and hungry. And I just wanted to wrap her up in something warm and look after her and make her a hot meal. But I was wondering whether you made a conscious decision to sort of apply your poet's eye to your prose, or whether that just comes naturally. You know, you have a poet's sensibility, so that naturally informs your prose.
Yeah, I think when I started writing the book, which is actually quite a long time ago now, I'd been sort of just totally immersed in poetry, and I was reading poetry all the time and writing poetry, and I was really sort of obsessed in a way with word choice and sentence rhythm and cadence and everything like that, and I couldn't sort of imagine writing a book that didn't have that in it. I don't know if I've maybe relaxed a bit more now, and maybe that's not so important to me, but it was because of just thinking about poetry all the time.
Yes.
So that was an element to it. Yeah.
Do you? I was just interested. Do you read your work aloud? Because when I'm writing, when I'm sort of editing my own work, I always read it aloud, because sometimes I feel that you can't hear if a sentence works until you've actually read it aloud. Do you do that?
Yeah, I do. I do tend to do that. Yeah, I'll just kind of go over it in my head. And I think when I'd first sort of envisioned writing the book, I wanted something that felt very sort of bleak and like pared back, and that to be kind of reflected in the language as being quite sort of stark. So I really like sort of prose style that's quite stark. So it was sort of a challenge, and also to sort of describe characters like the father figure in it, Neil. He has a lot of sort of trauma inside him and a lot of sort of repressed feelings that he just doesn't want to express. So I didn't want to give too much insight into sort of his inner workings, and a lot of what he was feeling was just coming out in his body language or things that he was doing, because he himself wouldn't really be able to, I think, properly, you know, talk or even think about his feelings properly in his head. So that was sort of challenging, and I think added to some of the bareness or the starkness of the language or writing style as well. Yeah,
no, that characterization is very, very strong, and I loved all the characters, all the peripheral characters as well, who, you know, you gradually get to know and read the subtext as to what's going on. It's fascinating. And your full-time, your job, you work in publishing, don't you? You're a commissioning editor, preceptor, and I wondered. Oh, well, I'm just curious, really. I was wondering quite a few questions about this, but I was wondering whether while you were writing Pine, because I think I've read somewhere that you said it took 3 to 4 years to write it.
Yeah, it probably took actually even longer than it. Probably took about 4 or 5 years. Yeah, quite a long time.
The first novel always takes ages, doesn't it? It took me a long while. But I was wondering, did you actually tell your colleagues that you were writing a novel, or did you keep it a secret?
I just kept it a secret. Yeah, I didn't, especially I think working in publishing. Was working, you know, when I started writing it, I was an assistant, so I wasn't commissioning my own books, and you just kind of, you know, I had the fortune of being surrounded by really great writers, and for me to say, oh, by the way, you know, I felt like it would be the equivalent of sort of working at a record label with some really, you know, world-class bands, and then being like, oh, I actually play the guitar as well, you know. I think everyone would be like, oh, great, that's great, but you know, I've got some work to do. So yeah, I didn't tell anyone that I was writing a novel. I also just didn't want to give myself the pressure of it, of people asking how it was, and I didn't know when I'd finish writing it or if I'd finish writing it and stuff. So yeah,
I think that's quite a wise decision, because I mean, it took me a long while. I've been writing on and off all my life, but I was a closet writer for a long while. But as soon as you tell someone, when I started telling people that I was writing a novel, of course they're always asking you about it. Or have you written that novel yet? Or how's the novel coming on? And then you just get sick of it.
Yeah.
So I think that was a wise decision.
But people at work have been so nice about it now, and I've just kind of got into the habit of compartmentalizing it, though, of like not being used to talking about it at work. So when people would ask me, oh, so how's your book, I would just automatically think they were talking about one of my books that I'm publishing, and then think, oh yeah, you know about the other book that I actually published. So it's kind of weird talking about it at work, but yeah, everyone has been so nice about it.
Oh, that's lovely. And how do you think your experience as an editor has it helped you with your own writing? Do you think you're very strong on your editing your own work, you know, as opposed to looking at other people's work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, like, working in publishing, one thing is it means that I have to read and read all the time, which I think is probably worth any. Again,
no,
you can see
you're still there. I can still see you.
Yeah, so it meant that I had to read a lot, and then as an editor, I have to sort of talk about writing a lot and talk to my colleagues about what is working, or talk to writers about what I think's working and why, or what's not working. So just kind of being familiar, you know, I didn't do like a creative writing degree or anything, but just sort of being in the habit of being able to articulate what works, what a novel kind of wants, or what I think readers might want. That definitely all really helped. But I think that actually, you know, you can give lots of advice when you're not actually writing it. You know, I sometimes say it's a bit like trying to cut your own fringe. Like, it's better if somebody else does it, in terms of because you're like too close up to it. So yeah, it's kind of, you know, I really tried to put everything that I'd sort of tried to learn on the job when I was editing my own book. But I think you just become like so close to everything, you know, that it's really hard to just, I couldn't have, you know, I really needed the help of my editor and agent. You know.
Definitely, because you're so close to your own work, aren't you? And you know it so well by the time you finish writing it, that you can't to use the forest analogy. You can't see the pine for the trees. You can't see the wood for the trees. Because you know what's going to happen, and you know any little twists or little things. So you're not best judged to know whether they're working or not. So that's why an outside eye is always vital, isn't it? And have you always wanted to be a novelist?
I think probably maybe not actively. I mean, I think I've just sort of always been like drawn to writing. Even when I was at school, I didn't sort of actively go out to think, oh, I will be a novelist or something like that. I didn't even think at school that I didn't even think about writing or anything like that. But I sort of have just ended up sort of falling into it just because I enjoy doing it. So, you know, writing stories or doing my school newspaper and stuff like that, doing my student newspaper when I was sort of meant to be studying. I ended up, you know, enjoying like writing film reviews instead and things like that. And then I think it was actually partly being in publishing it. I do feel again really lucky because I was sort of around writers, and you can see how hard it is to write a novel, and you can see what goes into a novel and how many people sort of, I don't know, all the kind of difficulties that there are being a writer. But I think I could also see that there were all kinds of writers, and you know, lots of people giving it a go, that sort of encouraged me in a way to do that as well. And I think if I hadn't been in publishing, I might have still, I don't know how to put, but like really put writers in a pedestal. Like think of writers as just being like the classic writers, you know, that you have to be a sort of Charles Dickens or Jane Austen, you know, to be a writer, like a sort of great writer. Whereas I think when you see there are just so many people out there writing all kinds of different things, you can see, okay, maybe I can have a go at doing this as well, sort of thing. So I think that gave me a bit of confidence in doing it. Yeah. How did you kind of come up to thinking that about being a novelist? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Well, I always wanted to be a novelist, actually, but I didn't really ever, for some silly reason, I didn't think it was a possibility. I don't know. I think, you know, I was saying this the other day to someone, there was no sort of Twitter or Facebook or anything like that when I was starting out. And so I didn't feel as if I was part of a writing community. Like, you know, aspiring writers, I think, are so lucky today because they've got so many different online, you know, groups that they can join and encouragement, ways to find information. I used to have to sort of go to the library and get down a huge writers and artists yearbook and read through it. But for a long while, I used to write poetry. I didn't sort of submit it to be published, but I used to enjoy writing poetry. And then I sort of moved on to short stories and things. But yeah, I think with me, life just got in the way. You know, I had children young and I was working in quite a sort of high-powered job and didn't really have much time. And I know some people do that, don't they? Some people manage to hold down, like you, hold down a full-time job and write a novel. But I was never one of these people who could sort of get up at 5 a.m. and write 2,000 words, make the breakfast, go to work. I couldn't do it. So it really wasn't until I was in my sort of mid to late 40s and I had a period of ill health that I had time at home to sort of think, well, you know, something's got to give. I've got to do what I've always wanted to do and take this writing seriously. So that's when I decided I would apply to the Faber Academy course. And yeah, so it did happen eventually, but it was a long journey for me. It's a very long journey. But I'm loving it now. Absolutely loving it.
It's, yeah, I think it's good for people to know, you know, if people are thinking of how do they start writing or how do they get into it and stuff, how people kind of like find their way into writing.
And it's also, you know, it's hard work. I think people have this idea that, you know, we just sit down and inspiration comes and it all happens. It really doesn't. You know, and it's jolly hard work. And, you know, although, you know, my two novels have been, you know, they've been really successful, you know, and I'm delighted, and it might seem as if that's all happened very quickly and suddenly, but you know, it's been a long journey, and there've been lots of unfinished, unpublishable novels along the way.
Yeah, that's really true actually, because during this sort of period of just being at home a lot, I've been sorting out my flat, as I'm sure lots of other people have been doing, and I was sort of sifting through all these papers in boxes under my bed and thinking, God, I really submitted a lot of poetry to places and I got rejected a lot. You know, I got things published, but I also got things rejected. I sort of, you know, would be writing short stories that never went anywhere. I started a novel at one point that I sort of abandoned. And it is, you kind of forget that you've done all these bits and bobs of writing, and it takes quite a long time to sort of get to that point where you think you can write a novel that you feel confident in. But yeah, it's good to know, I think, that it's sort of, I feel like being rejected is like part of the process of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it took you 3 to 4 years to write Pine, but presumably your next one will have, I mean, are you writing another one now?
Yeah, I am writing another one actually, which I feel very excited about doing, and it's just been so amazing to see sort of people's reaction to Pine. It's really like bowled me over. I just did not expect it at all, to be honest. So yeah, I've got ideas, and I've got some words on the page for the next book, which, yeah, I feel like I'm maybe not in quite the right stage of talking about it, but
No.
I wanted to be sort of set in Scotland again and having a kind of definitely having like a mystery at the centre of things. And I really actually enjoyed writing the two teenage girls in Pine, who didn't. I don't know. It was probably just because I was the age of Lauren when I lived in this place that I sort of thought of the girl who, you know, having her as the main character. But then when I wrote kind of Anne-Marie, I sort of started off with a really small group of characters, and I only brought in new characters if I felt like the story really needed it. So I brought in her friend Diane because she sort of needed a best friend for the purposes of the plot. And then I just really loved writing them. I sort of like just got really into writing those kind of teenage girls. So I think that the next character will not be them exactly, but be like a sort of a girl who's just finished school, just thinking about going to university. But yeah, I need to sort of get back into training, as you were talking about getting up early, working late. And get back into that mindset. Yeah.
But I know what you mean about not being in a position yet to talk about what you're writing, because I think when you're, you know, in the early stages of a novel, it's still, you don't really know, you've got these sort of nebulous ideas, haven't you, as to how it's going to turn out. And so talking about it too soon can sort of, I don't know, you're not quite ready, are you, to discuss that?
I don't know whether what I've got now will stick until the point where I should finish the book, but I do kind of keep thinking about it, and yeah, I think I'm going to properly kind of get cracking with it, I think, from about November onwards. Yes,
I've got to get cracking on my next one. I mean, my next novel's coming out in March, The Dare, but I'm writing book 4 now, and progress is slow. I hope my editor's not
copy of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the trouble with holding copies of books up on Instagram Live is that they come out back to front, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh dear. I was going to ask you what it's been like bringing out your debut in during a global pandemic. I mean, that can't have been what you were anticipating. What's that been like?
No one really saw this coming, apart from maybe I did go to a tarot reader at the beginning.
Did you predict COVID? Oh my god.
And he's kind of said, everything's going to go really well for you, which I was like, really? Are you just saying that? And then he was like, yeah, but you're just going to be in a totally different place. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Because I'm thinking about moving house to like somewhere in London, and I was like, and he was like, no, you're going to be in like you'll be just somewhere else completely different that no one will even expect you'll ever end up in this place. So make of that what you will, but I kind of now thinking about it, did you mean that? Well, I guess I am everyone's in a really weird place that we just would never expect to be in. Yeah. So about kind of, I do actually feel really lucky as well that my novel came out in January, when we actually were able to have a book launch with like real people.
Yeah.
And now when I kind of think about it, to like us all kind of squeezing into this bookshop and like sharing snacks and things like that, it just feels totally unreal. I know that we were ever in that position.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So that, you know, was wasn't really affected by it, and I do actually really feel for a lot of writers who haven't, you know, been able to have that sort of book launch, especially debut writers. I think, you know, I've been sort of feeling fine mainly over this time period. I've actually loved online events. Like, I've actually watched the Waterstones event a lot, and now I'm like, oh, I'm actually on it. But yeah, I really enjoyed those kind of events, and I think it's mainly been all right. My kind of main worry was actually more for like independent bookshops and Waterstones, just that the kind of physical book trade, and that physical bookshops would still be sort of able to, you know, carry on. as they were, and I think they've kind of met quite a lot of challenges, but it's also been really nice to see people supporting bookshops and getting in the habit of buying books online, but not always from, you know, the obvious place. You can buy
the place that mustn't be mentioned.
Yeah.
not on the Waterstones around live, for sure. But yes, that's I know what you mean. There has been a lot of book love for independent shops, haven't there, and bookshops in general, which is really heartening to see, isn't it? And like you, my book, The Who Did You Tell, came out in January, so I was lucky enough to have a launch. And you know, looking back on it, it just seems unreal, really, that we were all hug a mother in a shop, you know, drinking and stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. Although, you know, that's been disappointing for a lot of debut novelists, there's been a huge sort of outpouring, I think, of support, with lots of authors, well-known and established authors, supporting debuts this year. And lots of online events, as you say. I mean, I used to hate doing anything to do with video calls or anything. I used to absolutely hate them. Now I'm on them all the time, and we just all got used to it, haven't we?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly everyone's got used to this. Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I still have been visiting physical bricks and mortar bookshops as well. Even, you know, with the mask and hand sanitizer and stuff, and it's been a really nice thing to do, actually.
Yes, I saw some pictures of you on Twitter with your mask in the shop.
Yeah, a really big one. Yeah, I felt a bit weird going into bookshops and saying I'm the author of this book, because you can't really like tell who I am. It could just be anyone going in.
Yes, you could. Yeah. I wonder if it's time that we should actually enable some comments and look at some questions. What do you think? I'm going to how did you choose which writers or people you would include in the book? Someone said, can we have a signed edition, please? That's in it. How did you choose which characters to put in your book? That's one of the questions.
That's a good question. I mean, I suppose the book started with me envisaging this sort of valley, I suppose, that goes into the hills. That the first place I moved when we moved to the Highlands went this sort of empty road, and then I imagine this woman kind of coming onto the road, wearing this dressing gown, which I had imagined it was that she'd escaped from somewhere and she'd grabbed this dressing gown, and so I think that just sort of came to me, and then I sort of wanted to like build a story around that. The father and daughter, I don't really know where these particular characters came from, but I just I suppose I started with like a very small cast of characters, and the going around the houses at Halloween for guising was kind of a way of introducing people. I kind of wanted to make the most out of a small cast of characters, and then build on that story, or just kind of get the most out of them as possible for my first book, and not try to kind of have like a cast of hundreds that I wanted. I would find that too overwhelming, I think. Yeah.
Sometimes character just arrives in your head, doesn't it? I know that my character Astrid in Who Did You Tell, and as soon as I had her name and her voice, she was just there. She was very, very sort of present. But it is interesting, isn't it, how we develop our characters. Let's see whether we've got some more questions. Let's have a look. Can we have a signed edition, please? I'm just scrolling through this. Oh, that's a good one. Would you go back to an abandoned novel to see if you could finish it?
Oh, that is a good question.
That is a good question. I'm not sure I would. I've got quite a few abandoned novels. I have on occasion I have thought about resurrecting one or two of them, but I think there's a reason that those ones didn't get published.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think there's kind of a reason why I abandoned the novel that I started writing, because I just didn't like love it enough. I think it's sometimes like when I had to write a dissertation at university, or you have to like choose you have to choose a subject that you are happy to spend sort of years with and don't get bored of. So I think I just didn't love what I was writing about enough to kind of finish writing it. And like, that's why it's not particularly appealing for me to go back to it. But I suppose if there were other reasons why you abandoned a novel, then, you know, maybe it would be good to go back and see what you could do with it, I suppose. Yeah.
Some of my previous novels were in a different genre completely, so I'm not sure I'd be able to go back to them unless I maybe wrote them under a different name, because I'm you know, known as a psychological thriller writer now. So it's perhaps not a good idea to bring out a gentle comedy.
People be looking
I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we've got here. We've got lots of lovely questions. What's that one? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. What other authors inspired you? Hang on, I can't get rid of the questions now. Where have they gone? Oh, what other authors have inspired you?
I think I was definitely looking at authors who were very economical with their style, which I don't know whether I managed to pull it off as well, but I really like Daniel Woodrell's book Winter's Bone. That there was a film of it as well, but he just describes the landscape in the kind of Ozarks so well, and he describes a snowy landscape and trees, but he finds all these imaginative ways to write about them. And at the heart of the story is kind of a mystery of this girl who goes on to find out like what's happened to her father. But I just love the sort of the landscape that he put me in. I really love Andrew Michael Hurley as well, and I love the lonely sense of gothic and kind of horror that he writes about. I love Jenny Fagan as well as a Scottish writer. I love her book The Panopticon, and the sort of teenage sort of rebellious characters that she has in those. And yeah, kind of writing about Scotland like Ian Banks, and I liked sort of Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, there's quite a few books. Yeah, yeah, sorry, we could run on, but yeah.
It's actually quite a difficult question to answer, isn't it? Because so many authors inspire you, really, don't they? I mean, I think any book can inspire you, because you know, you pick up any book, they're all so different. I mean, my sort of, I suppose my influences were the sort of you know, when I got into crime fiction in the first sort of instance, it was reading Ruth Rendell and P.D. James. And,
yeah, brilliant. I love them. Yeah,
I just devoured them all. So I suppose that was my first experience of reading crime. I don't just read crime thrillers, obviously I read widely.
Yeah.
But, in terms of sort of that very well plotted, but I love books where you can learn something as well, that have got quite a lot of detail. But it's really difficult to pick a favourite author or a favourite book, isn't it? It's hard.
Yeah, but I do love books that are really well plotted. I'm sort of, I just sort of became obsessed a bit with storytelling, and even just so when I was growing up, I was told a lot of sort of ghost stories and like urban legends, and just the kind of twists and turns of those, or learning those stories and telling them to other people. And I don't know, I just became really interested in storytelling, and whether you see that now in like books or on TV shows, or I think even like a lot of documentaries, they're sort of cut in a way that these revelations come out, or these twists and turns that I really admire people that can write like a really good plot.
Yes. Yeah, no, talking of TV dramas and things, I was thinking, in case one of these questions came up, but I was thinking of I don't know if you saw it, there was a crime drama on a while back. It was called Traces. It's got there's a Scottish theme there. It's called Traces, and it's based on a original idea by Val McDermott. It wasn't written by her. I think it was written by, who was it written by? It was written by Amelia Bullmore, who also wrote Scott and Bailey, and it's set in Dundee in the world of forensic science, and it was
I should definitely watch that.
It's called Traces. I watched it twice, and I think I can get inspired by watching something like that as well, because as you say, you know, the way they cut the scenes and the way the story is drip fed, that can really sort of give you ideas as to how you can make your own writing. Interesting.
Definitely.
let's see what else. I'm going to enable the comments as well, just in case anybody wants to comment, as long as it's a nice comment, folks. Let's have a look. Oh, there's so many. Do you know, that one is so small I can't even read it. I think we all know that all aspects of writing novels are important, characters and settings, but what would you say is the most important to you? What aspect of the novel is the most important? Gosh.
I think probably for me the characterization, that you sort of feel invested enough in the character that you think you want to carry on with it, that you know that's also when I'm reading books on submission as an editor, something that I'm looking for is feeling like invested in that character. They could be, you know, completely different to me. They could be not very nice people, even they don't have to be great, you know, people, but you just find them kind of interesting enough that you're like, I want to spend sort of 300 plus pages with this character and see what happens to them. So yeah, to me I think that's quite an important part of the book.
I think, I mean, every single part of a book is important, isn't it? Characterization, definitely. You've got to be invested in the character, haven't you, to want to follow their journey. But, you know, it just depends on the type of book, doesn't it? Sometimes a book can be about very little at all, but if the voice is strong, you know, you just, and the language is beautiful. I recently read a book called The Offing. I can't, you know, for the life of me, I can't remember the author, which is awful, but do look up, people, the writer of The Offing. And it's the language and the writing about nature is absolutely brilliant. But yeah, so all different aspects. We're getting some lovely comments coming in. People seem to, oh, really, Alison is really, oh, that's Alison, really enjoying your conversation. That's oh gosh, yeah. There's some nice comments. Thank you, people. Let's see if there's any more questions. And if there aren't, then I have got a couple more. I think that's probably most of those ones we've actually covered. I was going to ask about your, you know, everybody likes to know about rituals that we have as writers, where you actually write. Do you write at the desk? Are you one of these people who sort of write in your laptop, in bed or on the sofa? How do you write?
Yeah, well, when I started writing Pine, I didn't sort of have a desk or anything. I was just in a flat share, and I would write kind of just on my knees on the bed, which became I didn't feel like the ideal setup. And then when I moved in with my boyfriend, we got a sort of small like spare room that had a room for a desk in it, and that really, really helped me to write Pine. But then I often find myself going back to just balancing my laptop on my knees. For some reason it feels like more cozy or something like that, or less, like more informal. So yeah, and I think just having like a full-time job, I didn't have a sort of set like I don't know, like sort of you know, routine is what I mean. I sort of was just writing like when I could find the time to do it, but I would sometimes listen to sort of music, or you know, I sometimes like, I don't know, have like a scented candle, or like do something to like mark the sort of, okay, right, need to focus on this task in hand now, and spend a few hours on it. And I also actually had an app which kind of gives you like, I think 20 minutes or something like that as a timer, which it kind of switches off the internet for like 20 minutes and then lets you have a 5-minute break and then another 20 minutes, which I found quite helpful actually, to sort of focus on things. Because yeah.
Well, by the way, I've just seen a comment. That author, I was just trying to remember the name of The Offing, Benjamin Myers. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, that's
for told me that. And sorry, Benjamin, I forgot your name.
That's fun.
Oh, dear. Oh, I think you've frozen. Oh no, you're back. You're back. You're back. You're back. Oh, Mandy wants to know, or Mandy's family wants to know, what are you reading at the moment?
Oh, well, what I'm reading at the moment is The Dare by Lesely Kara. And I'm really, really enjoying it.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, it's really, I really love again, like really good female characters in that, and like so much sense of intrigue as well.
Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm about to start a proof because we get sent lots of proofs, don't we now? And by Nadine Matheson called The Jigsaw Man. So she's a debut novelist, I think, coming out next year. So that's one I'm about to start. But yes, I get sent so many proofs and I would love to be able to read them all, but you just can't, can you? But you've obviously got the speed reading technique as an editor. You must have to read hundreds and hundreds of books.
Frozen slightly.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got maybe time for just a couple more questions and then it might be time to go. We've done that one, haven't you? Oh, that's a good one. What's your earliest memory of storytelling? I like that one.
Oh, that is a really good question, actually. I think maybe the earliest, one thing that I can remember early is that I had a book of fairy tales and I really loved the story of, there was a story about Persephone who went to the underworld, which now I think about it is quite a gothic
Yes,
story.
Definitely.
But I really loved the kind of, it's sort of like about mother-daughter relationship. But yeah, I think it's probably my mum reading me like a book of fairy tales I really enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, my earliest memory is definitely being read to by my mother. And I learnt to read very quickly. She used to read me the noddy books, but the ones that the politically incorrect noddy books, as they were then, back in when I was, I'm not going to tell you what decade I was a little child in, but anyway, yeah. So listening to my mum reading, and also there used to be a program called Jackanory. I'm not sure, it's not still on, is it? I don't think, Jackanory, but that used to be great. It used to be listening to stories, children's stories. So I really enjoyed that. So. Right. Well, I think we've more or less come to the end of our time, haven't we? I don't know if there's any more questions. No, I think I can't read that question. That's in a different language. I wish I could. Citrus 501. Sorry about that. But I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you this evening, Francine. It's been a real pleasure.
It's a real pleasure to talk to you too, and I'm just grateful for everyone who is tuned in and who's read my book, and it's been really lovely.
It's the right month to read it in. So folks, if those of you who haven't yet read Pine or bought a copy, then please do, because now is the perfect time to read Pine. And if you buy it now, you can get it ready for reading on Halloween night, which would be a great time to start it, wouldn't it? When you're curled up on the sofa, safe indoors, or are you? No, thanks a lot, Francine. It's been a real pleasure, and best of luck. And I hope to see you in the Sunday Times top 10 next week as well. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
I've got to remember to save this now. If I don't save this, Waterstones will be so cross with me. So I better do it right. Okay. Bye. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.